Well, welcome and good afternoon. My name is Nathan Stelter. I hear president at the Stelter Company. Thank you, as always, for joining us for this webinar today. Excited to introduce Lindy in a hot minute here, but first want to say a few words around this webinar series. As many of you are familiar, Stelter, as a trusted leader in asset-based giving, is passionate about supporting nonprofits with fresh ideas and practical guidance. We're proud to help build connections across the sector and are pleased to offer the series of free webinars for now almost a decade or so now, bringing you experts like Lindy from across the country to help unlock new revenue throughout your development portfolio. Today's webinar is actually the third in our 2025 curriculum. Some presenters and topics still to come, as you can see on your screen this year, and include our friends from the Mayo Clinic talking about turning planned gift inquiries into planned gifts. The always impressive and amazing Jim Langley talking about autobiographical interview. And then our own Lynn Gomer, along with special guests here from Stelter, talking about the latest Giving USA 2025 report and everything you have to look forward there too. So do, as we get closer to those dates, look for your personal invitations to register for those webinars. If you did miss any of our webinars earlier in this year or are looking to review, always feel free to go to stelter.com/webinars to access that content. So now back to our presentation for today. Again, excited to introduce friend and colleague Lindy Nash to the Stelter webinar series this year. Lindy serves as partner in the Bequest management practice at Chisholm Chisholm and Kilpatrick. Her practice focuses on representing national charities and nonprofit organizations in fulfilling wishes of charitable donors while maximizing gifts and minimizing administrative burden. She's an amazing individual with a lot of different things on her plate these days, serving as a national member or a member of the board of directors for the National Association of Charitable Gift Planners, as well as the vice president of programming for the Plain Giving Group of New England, PICNI. She's also immediate past president of the Board of Trustees at the Providence Animal Rescue League. So very excited to have Lindy share with us some great insights today, and I will hand it off to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Nathan. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. And really, thanks, Nate and Jen, for having me. I am super excited to be here to present during the Stelter webinar series. And our topic today is the top 10 bequest administration roadblocks and how to get around them. So as Nate was mentioning during my introduction, we represent national nonprofits who have chosen to outsource their bequest administration work. So this is what I do all day long. My team and I, this is it. So I have the privilege of working with several different nonprofits, and I get to see what all of the battles they are fighting, every day. And so we run into roadblocks all the time, and we have developed some tips and tricks that we want to share with you on how to get around them. And like Jen said, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or in the Q&A section, and we'll be sure to hit them at the end. I will save some time. And Aaron, there are no snacks, unfortunately, but I think Nate should have sent us some to our door. So next time, Nate. But hopefully you have some popcorn and a drink as we get going. All right, so with that, let's hit our first roadblock. Okay, so this is probably the most popular thing that we deal with here at CCK, and I'm sure everyone who's watching this is kind of nodding their head slowly because they have dealt with this, right? The first roadblock is a slow or unresponsive representative. And when I say representative, I mean executor trustee. So maybe you get that notification in the mail saying, guess what? Your charity has been remembered in Mr. Smith's estate plan, and I'll get back to you with next steps. So you say, great. And of course, you're sad that your donor has passed, but you're looking forward to this gift maturing. And so you kind of put it to the side and you start to track it. And all of a sudden, a month goes by, 2 months go by, 3 months go by, and you know where this is going and you haven't heard from them. Or maybe you get a quick response to your email, but nothing further. So what do you do then? So here are some tips and advice. So before doing anything, I just want to put this out there. Always consider who is the executor or the trustee, right? The executor or the trustee could be a family member, could be a friend, could be a neighbor of the donor. It could be someone who played a really important part of their life. So always keep in mind before you, start to get potentially angry or impatient with them. Is this some potential stewardship opportunity? Are they grieving? What's going on kind of in the background? And of course, give them a little bit of space and time before you do anything too extreme. So just keep that in mind. Family member or friend, always be a little more sensitive, always be a little fluffier in your correspondence up until the point where you can't be fluffy anymore. And we'll get to that in a second. Or is this an attorney? Is this someone who is a professional fiduciary who has a responsibility to keep the beneficiaries updated? Something else to keep in mind is, are they a solo practitioner or part of a firm? So whenever my team comes to see me and they have a question about how to handle a slow or unresponsive representative, this is the first thing that I ask. Are they an attorney? Yes. Let me guess. They're a solo practitioner, right? And usually the team nods their head and says yes. Unfortunately, solo practitioners have a lot on their plate and they don't have a lot of assistance. That's no excuse, of course, for being able to give you, proper responses and tell you what you need, but that does explain a lot. So just keep that in mind. Are they working by themselves? Are they in a group? What's going on? And then kind of go from there. My recommendation is to always keep consistent communication right from the beginning. Of course, calling is good. Pick up the phone, send them, an email, that kind of thing. But send a letter, put something in the mail, what we call papering the file, because you will need a trail of evidence to show everything that you've done during your period of time. If you do have to go to court, and again, we'll talk about that later, you're going to need evidence to show what you've done and how this person has been unresponsive or just slow to respond. So always paper the file. Another piece of advice is to research the local probate rules. So if this is a will that's going through probate, there usually are some sort of deadlines that the executor has to meet. So always look into those. Is this happening in Providence, Rhode Island? What are the rules in Providence, Rhode Island? How long do they have to file for probate once a person has died? Sometimes, depending on the state, it can be a really short period of time. It can be a month or 3 months. Sometimes, depending on the state, it can be up to a year or 2 years or 3 years. And so in those circumstances, it's a little bit tougher to push action. But I would always advise to research the local probate rules. And once you do find the statute, say, you're here in Rhode Island and you know that there's 90 days to file an inventory. If you're up to, 120 days, if it's been a month past that deadline, cite that statute in your letter. Be really polite, be understanding, but you can say, it's my understanding that in Providence, you have 90 days to file the inventory. This is yet to be done. Could you please pass that on when it's ready? And again, paper the file, put it all in a letter, and keep those coming. So sometimes maybe the representative is slow, but they're responding. So they're giving you answers to your emails, but they're just not answers that are helpful. So in that circumstance, I would try to ask for a partial distribution. Typically these bigger gifts, if you're a residual beneficiary and you're getting a percentage of the estate, usually those come in sections. So you're not going to get one big check for your whole distribution. It's going to come in maybe 1 or 2 or even 3 checks. So if someone is really overwhelmed, they have a lot going on, if this is a solo practitioner who has, a lot on their plate, sometimes I even say, listen, Attorney Jones, I'll get out of your hair for at least a month, 2 months, if you could give us a partial distribution. Just give my client something small, a part of their gift, and we will, let you kind of get back to your work and do what you need to do. But just give us a partial distribution. And sometimes that works. And part of that is offering what's called a refunding agreement. And that usually makes them feel really comfortable. So if you say, how about a partial distribution? We're happy to sign a refunding agreement. And what that means is the refunding agreement just says, if I, issue $20,000 to the charity and for some reason I need to take it back, I, was short on taxes or didn't pay this bill, you'll give it back to me. And usually in our experience, we're okay signing refunding agreements as long as they're limited to the amount our client received. So again, if someone is responsive but just slow, I would say to try and get a partial distribution because at least that's a little bit of money in the door. And again, offer a refunding agreement. Finally, you can seek the Attorney General, the AG, or court intervention. We have a case going on in California right now, and we are asking the court to kind of demand a distribution. So we haven't gotten to the point of removing the PR, although we're very close. But we've submitted something to the court saying, can you please, force the PR to make at least a partial distribution? So you can ask the court to order a distribution, or you can take it a step further and ask the court to remove the personal representative or the trustee. And if you're seeking removal, just, be prepared, like I said, to paper the file, to show your evidence about how they have ignored you, how they're maybe misusing funds. Any evidence that you have to demonstrate that this person isn't doing what they need to do is helpful. So make sure, again, paper the file, take notes, keep it all together. And if you're seeking removal, you'll probably need local counsel in that area. So if it's out in LA, you're going to need, an attorney in LA. If it's here in Providence, you're going to need someone here in Providence. Usually you need someone to kind of file that paperwork and push it through the court system. But just know that if it's slow, unresponsive, you can ask for that person to be removed. Then I have a couple other ideas. So this is you and you're very stressed like this. So how are you going to get some movement on this estate or trust administration? Here are some other ideas. So this may or may not get movement, but something that I recommend is if you are dealing with a executor or trustee who's unresponsive, and this is sad to say, but I would do an obituary search or check a site called, we subscribe to People Finders, but there are plenty other sites out there. I would check for this. This person may be deceased, or maybe they moved and they just forgot to tell you. So perhaps you're sending letters to an old address, or you're calling an old number, or you're emailing an old email address. So do this type of search and see if you can find new contact information for them. I will say during 2020, kind of in the peak of the COVID pandemic, we were running into a lot of unresponsive trustees and executors. Well, I won't say a lot, but at least several. And it ended up that they had passed due to the pandemic. So just know that these things happen. Sometimes people nominate older folks, it's their neighbor who they've known their whole life. And if the donor is 85, then the neighbor might be 85 too. So anyway, you never know. Do an obituary search and check People Finders. If this is in probate, try checking the docket online or calling the clerk's office. You can also reach out to other charitable beneficiaries, because sometimes, there's power in numbers. So if you know that you're being remembered alongside American Heart Association, shoot Andy an email and say, hey, Andy, have you had any contact with this person? Do you want to write a letter together? Again, strength in numbers. Sometimes that unity, that strong letter from more than one charity helps kind of get the ball rolling. And feel free to, mention you're going to contact the AG's office if you don't hear from them shortly. That can always kind of get some movement too. This is probably one of my favorite tricks. So if your representative is an attorney and they're part of a firm, go to their website and find the managing partner. I can't tell you how good, this is a really good tip. It works every time. Nothing gets that associate moving quicker than hearing from their boss that, they need to do something. So you, again, be very nice, be very polite, but find the managing partner, shoot them an email or call them and just say, listen, I hate to bother you, but your associate Joe Schmo is supposed to be administering this estate and I haven't heard from them. They will not return my emails. They won't return my calls. And I just want to know a status. As a beneficiary, you're entitled to information. You're entitled to know what's going on in the administration. And again, this is a really good way to get some movement, but it only works if they're part of a firm and they have sort of a boss. If they are the boss, then that can be tricky. But assuming they're an associate, senior associate, even another partner, look for the managing partner and reach out to them. Okay, so those are some tips and tricks, but let me know if you have any other ones. I'm all ears, could always use some more. Okay, so let's talk about ambiguous gift instruments. So we run into this from time to time, and I'm sure you all have as well. Something that we have seen before is the misnamed charity. So one of the examples I have here is, did the donor mean to say the Cool Cats Club, but they wrote the Cats Are Cool Club? Again, you guys are going to think I'm obsessed with cats by the end of this presentation, and maybe I am. But that's just an example. So it's really easy to, change one word of a charity's name and you're actually indicating a totally different charity. A lot of charities have similar names, as you guys know. Some charities are part of a federated model. There's kind of a national branch and then there's chapters beneath it. Did the donor mean this chapter? Did they mean the national branch? What did they really mean? So piece of advice here also kind of on the side is please have a part of your website that's easy to find with sample bequest language. I can't tell you, sometimes I'm poking around on different charities' websites and they either don't have a planned giving site, or if they do, it's hard to find the information that you need. It's hard to find the contact person. It's hard to find your EIN number. It's hard to find the address that should be used. Make it as clear as day so that a donor who is working with an attorney trying to do their estate plans, they just happen to love your organization, but maybe they're not known to you. Make it really easy to find. This is our legal name, this is our EIN, and this is the address. And here's some sample language that you should copy and paste right into your will. Really make it super easy for them so that you don't have these circumstances with misnamed charity or naming your charity, but listing a different EIN for somebody else. We've seen that happens all the time. So anyway, just a piece of advice there. And if this does happen where you're kind of in this debacle, did they mean your charity or did they mean somebody else's charity? Look to your records. This is why having really good notes, plan giving notes and donor history notes is super important, because we have often won out on arguments before because we go to our client and we say, hey, did you know this donor? Did they have any history with you? Were they part of your legacy society? Did they make a donation? Anything like that is really helpful to demonstrate to the court, if it gets to that place, or to the executor, that you are the right charity. You are the person who's supposed to get this gift, not the guy down the street. So another reason to keep really good notes. If this does happen and you're in this kind of squabble with another charity or with the executor, if the executor is conservative, which usually they are, they will want to get court approval first. So don't be surprised if the executor says, hey, I think this is meant for you, but it's a little vague, it's ambiguous, therefore I'm just going to send it to the court to get approval. Don't panic right away, usually it's fine, but just keep your finger on the pulse of it, because you never know. I mean, does the other guy down the street, does he think it's for him? Does the charity down the street think it's for them and you think it's for you? Do you need local counsel to represent you? Just keep watch of it, stay informed, talk with the executor, make sure you know what's going on, because it would be really unfortunate if you're expecting this, solid gift, and then all of a sudden someone else comes forward and makes an argument that it should be for them, and then you end up losing out because you kind of lost track of it and didn't pay attention. So anyway, just kind of stay involved, check things out, stay in touch with the executor. They should be kind of neutral. They're supposed to stay in the middle. So don't feel as though they're absolutely fighting for you when, their job is to fight for the estate and to do what the donor wanted. So again, just keep in touch, make sure it's going your way. And if it's not, you may want local counsel. Similarly, ambiguous wording. So many of these wills and trusts are poorly drafted, as you probably have seen yourselves. Maybe the language names one charity, but the EIN matches another. Maybe it says, $1 million to my cousin Mark, but there's actually two cousin Marks. We've seen that before. So just be really careful about what the wording says. And again, read the gift instrument. It's so important when you're doing this. I call it active bequest administration. When you introduce yourself to the executor, whoever's running the show, always ask for the will, always ask for the trust, at least the part where you're named. That's the most important part. The whole document would be great. That's 10 out of 10. But if you can't get the whole document, at least ask for the part where you were named. That's most important. Again, ambiguous wording can take some time. It can cause a roadblock, and the executor or the trustee may want to go to court to determine who is really entitled to this gift. So again, don't be surprised if that happens. Sometimes you can work it out with the executor or the trustee. It depends. Some of them are a little loose, I would say, and will allow you to say, this is clearly for us. Maybe it's obvious that there is no other charity who would be benefiting from this. There's no other charity that it could have been. It's obviously your charity. In that case, they may be comfortable with just giving you the distribution. Something else to look out for when the residual percentages don't add up. So another reason why it's important to look at the whole gift instrument if you can. I talk about it all the time. I review gift instruments. I'm in the residual section, and yes, I'm bad at math, but I'm not that bad at math. Oh, there goes my lights. You keep adding up the percents and you keep getting 95, 95, 95, 95. That doesn't make sense. So eventually you realize that it's not your math, it's the gift instrument. It's poorly drafted. The math doesn't add up. So what are you gonna do with that extra 5%? As long as you're, a good reason to pay attention, practice this active bequest administration, perhaps the will says that you could share it among the other residual beneficiaries. Maybe if no one says anything, it could all just go to you, or maybe you're the only beneficiary and it'll go right to you. So always check the math, because that can be a holdup as well. Something else that we see in these gift instruments is the charity no longer exists. So not your charity, you exist, but maybe another charity is supposed to get 10% and the executor can't find them. They're calling here, they're calling there, they're sending letters, they're doing emails, they sent someone out there. The charity clearly is defunct and no longer exists. So again, check the gift instrument. Does it account for this? Usually it does. If it's a decently drafted document, usually it will say what will happen if a charity ceases to exist, or maybe a person. There's always a chance that maybe, cousin Joe was supposed to get a portion of the estate, but he's since passed. What does it say to do with his share? So look to the gift instrument and see if it accounts for this scenario. If it doesn't, again, talk with the executor or the trustee to try to move these things along and to see if you can get a share of what is kind of up in the air. All right, let's go on to number 3. So unwanted non-cash assets. Again, if I could see you guys, I'm sure a lot of you would be nodding your head like this. You know what I'm talking about. So every so often your charity is entitled to something, let's just say unique, something that isn't just a check or, piece of real estate. Maybe it's, and these are all real, we've seen these, wooden figurines, arrowheads, pets, timeshares, cemetery plots, even the donor's personal work of art that he requires to be hung in your lobby. True story. So what do you do with these? Maybe the executor offers to sell these on your behalf, which is great. We always kind of want the executor or the trustee to sell it on their own and then just give our client the distribution, usually anyway. But sometimes that doesn't work out. Maybe he can't find anybody to find the arrowhead or to buy the arrowhead rocks. Or one time we had a snakeskin collection, again, real story. And no one, shockingly, wanted to buy the snakeskins. So what do you do with those? Keep an eye on the time. Most states have a 9-month deadline to disclaim. So when the donor dies, the clock starts and you have 9 months to disclaim a gift. Again, that's in most states. Consider disclaiming. Our clients don't do it too often, but one example I can think of is our clients were entitled to, it was a deed, it was a transfer on death deed, and it was a house down in the South, I want to say Alabama. Literally, there were poisonous snakes in the front yard, a sinkhole in the backyard. The windows were boarded up and painted over. You couldn't open them, and the house was in complete disarray. It was a mess. It was a literal death trap. So our clients disclaimed that right in the nick of time. So again, consider disclaiming and look at your gift acceptance policy. Are you even allowed to accept arrowhead rocks? Can you accept this, my pal, this beautiful horse over here, or that shack, in the middle of nowhere? Look at your gift acceptance policy and make sure it's something that you can even take in. Again, if the PR trustee can't sell it, consider taking it in kind and using a third party to sell it for you. So my friend Brian Klontz at Charitable Solutions is fantastic. I'm sure everyone knows him, or at least knows of his services. I think the last time I heard him speak, he mentioned that he had sold a farm in Afghanistan. He really can do pretty much anything. So consider using him. He charges a really nominal fee to sell these pretty unique assets. So again, consider disclaiming. If you can't sell it or the PR can't sell it, consider taking it in kind and using Brian or someone similar. All right, let's move on. Oh, sorry, too fast. Okay, death certificates. So this guy on the right, he's very stressed and he's begging. He's on his knees and he's begging for one of these exceptions. So let's talk about this. Death certificates are often requested from the charity in a life insurance circumstance, some annuity, a pension plan, usually some sort of pay on death account. The company who is holding those funds will require you to submit the donor's death certificate. And again, I'm sure some of you have experienced this, but usually the charity doesn't have the death certificate. Sometimes they didn't even know the donor, right? You get this incredibly fantastic notice from, life insurance company saying that you're entitled to this, but we need the death certificate. And you think to yourself, well, how am I going to get that? I didn't even know I didn't even know Joe Smith. How can I get his death certificate? So here are some tips and tricks, but the death certificate can really cause a holdup because it, can be time consuming if you don't know how to get it. So first of all, one trick is to confirm with them that they don't already have it. I know this sounds simple and obvious, but when you get that letter from the organization, call them and say, I understand you're requesting a death certificate. I just want to confirm that you don't already have it from somebody else, because they may have named other beneficiaries like a family member, the executor, a niece, a nephew, someone who actually knew the donor and has access to their death certificate. So typically, if they already have a copy from somebody else, they don't need one from you. So if that's the case, you can just check that right off the list and not even worry about it. So always call before you go down this crazy, chase to get a death certificate. Always call and make sure that they don't already have it. If you knew the donor, call or go to the Office of Vital Records for the website, the website for the Office of Vital Records in the town or the city where this person last lived. Usually you complete a form, you may have to explain your relationship, like you're a beneficiary, and it's usually a nominal cost, like $20, $25, and they will send it to you in the mail. Sometimes the office is called something else, but usually it's Office of Vital Statistics or Vital Records, something like that. But you can usually do it online, and always call them again if you have questions about the forms. The forms change all the time. One time I called an office and I said, hey, I just want to make sure, this is the right form to submit. And she was like, oh no, that form's from 10 years ago. I'm like, well, why is it on your website? So just keep in mind that the form on the website might be old. Call them and just make sure you're doing everything right. But this is kind of the crux of the slide. So what do you do if you didn't know the donor? And that's why this guy is kind of praying like this. So first thing I would recommend is to call and explain. So fill out the paperwork to the best of your ability and then call the company and just say, really lean into the fact that you're from a nonprofit. We didn't have, the benefit of knowing Mr. So-and-so. This is an incredibly generous gift. He obviously wanted to support our mission. However, I have no way of accessing his death certificate. I didn't know where he lived. I don't know his friends and family. I don't know the executor. Can we have an exception here? Every so often with the right company, they'll say, put that all in writing, put it in a letter, send it to, my boss, or send it to general counsel, send it to someone, and we will see what we can do. So try that. If that doesn't work, again, call and explain, and this time beg for city and state of the donor. Because at least if you know where they lived, you can go back up to step 3 over here. And if you know that they were from Providence, Rhode Island, you can call the Providence Vital Records office and kind of go from there and start from step 1. So either, beg for the city and state. You can also try people finders. So back to that website that we use, try using people finders, look up the donor's name and see if you can find where they last resided. Another option is to call and explain again, beg for another contact. So sometimes the person at the company will give you the name of the donor's financial advisor or executor or someone who will have more information about the donor. So you can always ask for that. And then if all else fails, write a letter to a senior leader of the company, either general counsel or the president, CEO. Again, explain your circumstance, lean into the fact that you're from a nonprofit, you didn't have the benefit of knowing this person, and make sure it's signed by either your general counsel, your CFO, your CEO, someone high up at your organization, and put that in the mail, certified mail, and send it off and see what happens. So usually one of these will work for us, but let me know if you guys have any luck with these. Okay, so problems in the accounting. So really quick, before we get into the problems, I just want to talk about accountings for a second. So an accounting typically comes in the estate or trust administration towards the end of the administration. So, assets have been collected, everything has been marshaled, it's all in the trust account, and debts have been paid. And it's just a big, usually big, at least several pages document showing everything that's gone into the trust and everything that's gone out of the trust. And same thing with the estate. So it's a really great way for you to see, okay, these are all the assets. There was a house, there was a Ferrari, there was a, account with Bank of America. There was this Wells Fargo account. There's a, whatever condo in Vermont somewhere. So you can see everything that's in the account, and then you can see everything that's been paid out. So, okay, they hired a lawnmower for a couple of months to make the house look good so that it could be sold. They used an accountant. They, hired someone else to do some painting. They, whatever, did everything they could to try to make the assets the best they could be to be sold. So that's really the only way that you can see what comes in and out. Who is entitled to an accounting? And this is really important. Only residual beneficiaries are entitled to request an accounting. So a residual beneficiary is someone who's getting a percent of what's left. So if you're just entitled to a specific gift, $10,000, and you get your $10,000, then you shouldn't be asking for an accounting, right? Because in theory, you've got your gift. So what do you care what they do, right? You have all that you need, and you should kind of wipe your hands of it and walk away at that point. If you ask them for an accounting, they might, kind of laugh in your face and be like, I'm not giving that to you. So again, if you're a residual beneficiary, you're entitled to an accounting. Every so often we get pushback, and this is definitely a roadblock. The trustee refuses to provide an accounting. We've even gotten some pushback saying, okay, I'll give you one, but I'm only going to charge your client for, making me put that together, which is really uncalled for and absolutely unethical and ridiculous. So something that I usually start with is reminding them that it can be an informal accounting. And what I mean by informal accounting is it doesn't have to be this, 60-page spreadsheet with, an account statement from Wells Fargo. It doesn't have to be like that. It could be a Excel sheet. It could be a Word document. We've even gotten handwritten accountings. We just need to know generally, where did we start? Where did we finish? And what is our client getting? And then kind of understand how we got there, right? Is the mathing, as we jokingly say around here. So it's really important for you to know that, because if you're a residual beneficiary, every dollar that comes in and out of that account impacts you greatly. It makes a difference into what your gift is going to be if they, charge $100,000 to fly the whole family out to Hawaii for a burial at sea, when that was not something the donor requested. So again, the accounting is really important, and something that we do to kind of help get that is just say it can be informal. It can be a one-page Word document where you say where we started, any big kind of debts or income that came in and out, any expenses, and then where we ended up. Just super simple. And I know some charities actually have a kind of accounting template that they keep on hand, like a fill in the blank, and they provide that to some inexperienced trustees and executors who don't really know what to do. You can kind of give them that accounting and say, hey, just kind of fill in the blank. Again, where did we start? What happened in the middle? And where did we end? So consider that. Check the state statute. You can always cite this in your request. Some states don't mention it, but some states do. They will say you have to provide an accounting to a beneficiary when they ask for it. So again, that's really helpful, and that can be really persuasive in your emails, letters, phone calls, that kind of thing. Check the docket. If all else fails, we have called the court before. I've called the clerk before, and I've said, listen, I'm calling on behalf of charity ABC. The executor is being really difficult. They're refusing to give me the accounting. I can see that it's been filed. Would you mind sending over a copy? If they're really nice, they'll say yes, no problem. If they're not so nice, they'll say no, or they'll say yes, and it's 25 cents a page. Again, not a huge deal, a couple dollars just to get something that's really important to understand your gift is well worth it. So consider those things. Attorney, trustee, executor fees. So again, check the state statute. Depending on where this is being administered, they may have a really specific kind of equation for how to generate the fees for the attorney and the executor. Typically here at CCK, we use the 3 to 5% rule. So if it's anything under 3%, then that's fine. That makes sense. Anything in the 3 to 5% range, we look at a little closer, and anything over 5%, we always ask questions. Unless it's really obvious, we want to know why you're charging such a high fee. Again, charging a high fee means less money in the residue and therefore less money for our client. So just keep that in mind. Always look for signs of self-dealing. Does everyone have the same last name? So I saw this once in an accounting. The executor was Mr. McGillicuddy, and the guy who cut the grass was Mr. McGillicuddy. The guy who painted the fence was Mr. McGillicuddy. The woman who did the books was Mrs. McGillicuddy. The executor's whole family was benefiting from this gentleman who had passed away. And that's not okay. We've seen another example where there was an old car that the executor said he was going to fix and, put up for sale. He put all this money from the estate into fixing the car. And at the end of the day, he sold the car to himself at a very moderate price. So he used the estate funds to fix the car and make it, nice and shiny, and then sold it to either himself or his friend for a really good price. So look for stuff like that. Again, that takes money out of your gift at the end. If any of these things happen, what are your options? Again, always ask questions. We recommend being super polite and just shooting an email or sending, picking up the phone and calling and just saying, hey, thanks for the accounting. We really appreciate it. I hope you don't mind. I have some quick questions so that I can better understand this gift. Again, usually they're very nice and they're understanding and they're polite and they're happy to answer your questions. And you might even be pointing out an error that they missed. One time I reviewed an accounting, it made no sense. There was a huge chunk of money just missing and I couldn't figure it out. So I called the attorney and she was like, oh, that's right. I forgot to list the mortgage, the $250,000 mortgage. I'm like, oh, okay, well, that'll do it. So again, sometimes your questions are actually really helpful and will help the representative fix whatever the issue is. You can also ask for invoices or time logs. So if you really want to kind of understand why the attorney spent so much time on this case, you are totally entitled to ask for invoices. They might black them out a little bit and, redact them, but that's fine. If all else fails, you really think something fishy is going on here, they either stole money or they used it inappropriately. Again, I would hire local counsel and I would get to the bottom of it and let them know that you're taking this really seriously. And that also, just that threat alone could get them to give you some answers that you're looking for. But the accounting often causes several roadblocks because that's really where whatever they say, the rubber meets the road, right? That's where the money really comes into play and you can see exactly what happened. So it's a great, piece of evidence. It's a great document to have, but it can often be really illuminating. So check that out and go through that really slowly. Okay, so quick note about beneficiary designations. This is someone on the phone with Vanguard. Just kidding for any Vanguard attendees here. We all know that beneficiary designations are challenging. I hope most of you here know about Johnny Hayes and the RIF Project. She and the RIF Project are fantastic. If you don't know about it, it's great. If you go to the NACGP website and navigate kind of on the top I think it's in the resources section, click the RIF Project, and Johnny has put together this really great database of all helpful information about different financial custodians. And I'll tell you more about that in a second. But my first piece of advice, these take a long time. They can be roadblocks because there's so much red tape. So here are some tips to help you get through them quickly. When you get that letter and you get those forms, read the forms really thoroughly and always call before you submit them. I know this is annoying and no one wants to wait on the phone to pick up, a Vanguard representative, but I promise you it will save time on the back end because so many of these forms get bounced back for being incorrect or incomplete, or you wrote this person's date of birth, well, we really meant this person's date of birth. Like they're so vague and they're so poorly done that they are constantly bounced back. And that's why this is a roadblock, because it takes forever because the forms are incorrect. So I recommend completing the form and then calling, I keep using Vanguard, sorry to pick on Vanguard, call them and say, hey, I completed these forms. I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything. And then go through it with them and say, does this sound right to you? And they will say yes, or they'll say no. You'll understand where you need to fix certain things. Bullet point number 2 here is make sure you mark do not withhold taxes. It's usually in the middle, page 4 or 5, it's kind of hidden. You do not want taxes withheld from your distribution because you're a nonprofit. They shouldn't be withholding taxes. I will say that even though you check this box, when the distribution comes in, look at the distribution check. It's usually, one of those kind of trifolds, and make sure that no taxes were withheld. Because it's happened to us before where we have said, do not withhold taxes. We get the check and taxes were withheld. It's a huge pain, but just be really careful to mark the right boxes there and to check the check when it arrives and call them if it's wrong. Notary or medallion signature. So sometimes you'll see at the end, it's requiring a medallion signature. Again, call and confirm that. Sometimes they'll say, oh no, we don't need a medallion here. We just say that sometimes. Honestly, that is the absolute truth. Sometimes they don't need it and they say they do. So call them and just make sure that you really do truly need it. Usually there's some sort of value threshold. So call and double check. Requiring personal information, that's the inherited IRA, the infamous inherited IRAs. Again, this sounds like a silly piece of advice, but if you don't like what someone's saying, hang up and try again. Call back, get somebody else on the phone. I swear this also works where some person will say yes, some person will say no. For better or for worse, they don't know what they're doing, and they will often give you a different answer based on who you talk to. So try calling back and speaking to somebody else. If you do consider opening the inherited IRA, try to obtain the value, because I know it's really helpful for when, you go to your CFO or your CEO or your designated signer. If you can say, hey, please give me your date of birth, home address, social security number, because this is a $500,000 gift. They may be inclined to do that. But what if it's a $500 gift? Does your CEO want to give up their social security number for $500? Maybe, but maybe not. So try to get the value. That's really helpful. And then the other tip here is keep a list of who is helpful at which institutions. I have my favorite Fidelity person that I call when I'm stuck. I have my favorite, Charles Schwab person. I just met a lovely Edward Jones representative the other day. So again, keep a list of who's helpful and go back to them. And again, Johnny Hayes and the Riff Project. If you don't have that site, email me and I will give it to you, or ask a friend. Other people certainly have it. Okay, so we could have a whole presentation just on this slide alone, so I won't take up, too much time, and I know we're getting close to time too. So will and trust litigation. So usually this comes about because someone is saying that the donor was unduly influenced or they lacked testamentary capacity. What's interesting about capacity is that it can be kind of flowing. So you can have capacity 1 minute and then no capacity or lack of capacity the next minute. So it's a really interesting area of case law, and it's just fascinating, these cases that come up. But anyway, I won't get into the nitty-gritty there. Usually it's a caretaker or a family member who brings forward a new will or a new trust to replace the charities. I have a case in Pennsylvania, and the donor had a lovely, will giving pretty much everything to 10 different charities. And then about a month before she died, her friend, neighbor, caretaker produced a holographic will, which is a handwritten will, and it left everything to him. So, seems a little odd in my opinion. So we're working it out, but we are going through litigation to try to get to the bottom of it. But typically that's the scenario that you see. The next question is, do you want to participate in litigation, right? That's something that you need to decide for your organization, and loop in the right people. Make sure you have a plan for when you get this letter in the mail, because you need to know what to do so you can act quickly. Always do a cost benefit analysis, right? Is this a $1,000 gift that's in jeopardy, or is this a $1 million gift? If it's an $1,000 gift, you probably don't want to spend money on local counsel because you'll run through $1,000 in 2 seconds. But if it's a $1 million gift on the line, 500,000, 300, even 200, I would consider talking to local counsel. If you do decide to hire local counsel, here are some suggestions. Publicity concerns. So from everyone that I've spoke to in this space, usually publicity concerns don't actually come to fruition. For whatever reason, it doesn't always make the front page of the newspaper. Like, usually that's not a big deal. It doesn't actually happen. But consider it, how's your organization going to look if you're suing the, 85-year-old grandmother of this donor? That kind of thing. So just kind of think about it from a big point of view, a big scale. Phone your charity friends. This is the best group. So plan giver population community is so lovely and so fantastic to work with. Pick up the phone, shoot them an email and say, hey, obviously they're a co-beneficiary in this matter. Hey, what are you thinking about this? Do you have any interest in sharing local counsel? If you guys are similarly situated, you can share. You can go in together and kind of split the cost. And you can do that, 10 different ways. You can do it 15 different ways. So it just depends what other charities are involved. So don't forget to call your friends. You can always ask for a fee cap and to work with a senior associate. So attorneys charge by the hour. Usually associates are kind of the lowest level. Senior associate is kind of in the middle, and then partners charge the highest rate. So do you need to work with a partner? Can you work with a senior associate? Is there some sort of nonprofit discount? Again, don't be shy. Ask about that, because usually attorneys will give you a discount because you're from a nonprofit. The firm should specialize in trust and estate litigation. This is, kind of a joke, but not really. I know you're going to be tempted. Don't use a board member who will offer to do this pro bono. I promise it's not going to work out. Even if they try their best and they're, doing everything they can to fight for you and be a zealous advocate, when things are done pro bono, they're not often the front burner. They're not often at the forefront of this person's mind. And usually these board members don't specialize in trust and estates litigation. If they do, then great, fantastic. But usually they're, a bankruptcy attorney, they're a business lawyer, they're in family law. Those people don't have the specialization to handle these cases. So I would just avoid that and try to find local counsel. All right. So a quick note on restricted gifts. This happens to us all the time. So you're reading a will or a trust, and it just is a kind of general purpose. It's an unrestricted gift, but comes with requested restrictions from the living. So we had one recently where the executor was a cousin of the donor, and she called us and basically said, yeah, I know that's what the will says, but she really wanted it to go here. She really wanted it to be used in this country or doing this program. So, what do you do there? Of course, you want to be polite and kind to the executor and the family member, but at the same time, what I have here is that the gift instrument is what prevails. Legally, all that you have to abide by is what's in the gift instrument. So if you don't want to put that gift towards a program in charity or country ABC, you technically don't have to. So that's a decision that you need to make within your group. Of course, keeping stewardship in mind, is this someone who could be a future donor? Is this someone who could give you a large bequest in the future? Keep that in mind, but don't feel like you have to do what they say, because you absolutely don't. The second thing here is bequest is restricted, but charity can't abide by it. So we see this from time to time as well. $50,000 gift, and it must be used in the anthropology department. However, you got rid of the anthropology department a couple of years ago. What do you do? So here, sometimes you can negotiate with the executor or the trustee, but sometimes, again, the executor wants the court to kind of approve what you're going to do. They're going to approve the modification of the restriction. So that's the most, conservative way. That's the best way to really do it, get the court's approval. But sometimes if you can have a little wiggle room with the executor or the trustee, you don't have to go through the court, but that's really their decision. It's not up to you. They will make that decision. But again, important to stay on top of these things, make these quick decisions so that you can get your gift in the door as quickly as possible. Okay, so receipts and releases. I know I'm getting close to time, Jen, so I'm almost done. Receipts and releases, most important is to make an internal plan. So when you get these bequest gifts, almost always you will get some document in the mail asking you to sign receipt, release, waiver, acknowledgement, whatever it might be. So make a plan in advance. Who can sign these at your organization? Do you have the right to sign them? Does your boss have to sign them? Does the CEO have to sign it? Make a plan now and then keep that going. Similarly, do you have a corporate resolution? That's something that's signed by the board, basically saying who can sign documents in certain circumstances. So that's always helpful to have. Should you sign the receipt before you have the check? I don't like to, because that just doesn't make sense to me. I don't think it's helpful to say you have something when you don't. So I would do a little carrot and say, we will receive. Feel free to make, those kind of edits. And send it back to the attorney and just say, hey, I made this slight edit. Is that okay? Refunding agreement, I talked about this before. We're okay with refunding agreements as long as it's limited to the amount received. So always make sure that's there. If you're getting a $5,000 gift, you don't want to be on the hook for refunding, $500,000. So just limit it. Same thing with scary indemnification language. So always look for these three terms: indemnify, defend, and hold harmless. We always try to strike those out. If the attorney gives us a hard time and says no to our edits, again, we want to limit that to the amount received. So see if they will accept that. Again, a little carrot saying, up to the amount received. That is kind of second best case scenario. All right, and then I just have one more. Okay, so contingent gifts, unfortunately, you usually just have to wait. So patience is a virtue here. Contingent gift means that you will be getting a gift, but not until someone else passes away. So lifetime beneficiary or a retained life estate. The lifetime beneficiary isn't always a human, fun fact. We have some cat beneficiaries, we have some horse beneficiaries. So typically for those, we follow up once a year. You don't want to be following up basically saying, hey, did so-and-so die yet? That doesn't sit well with most people. So we check in once a year. We do an obituary search. We check in with the trustee. That's kind of what we recommend. Every so often, these do terminate early, and you can receive the gift sooner than expected. We never, here at CCK, we don't usually ask for that. We don't initiate that termination of an early trust termination, but we do hear from trustees from time to time that they want to do it. They want to end it early. So they don't want to be the trustee anymore. They just want their payment now. They want us to get our payment now, and we work with them to help that happen. So don't be surprised if you get that question from time to time, and it's usually fine to terminate early. Okay, so my last thing, sometimes there are issues that don't have a clear solution. The Attorney General backlog, looking at you, state of New York and New Jersey and Pennsylvania, those I don't have a great answer for besides waiting. The same thing with the IRS backlogs, those continue. One thing I'll say, the third point here is the personal representative doesn't want to be the PR and they want to step down, but no one else wants to do it. Beneficiaries have to find a replacement. So that can be a challenge, that can take some time, but there are plenty of professional fiduciaries out there who would love to do it. So I would recommend looking up someone in that area to take their place. And then lastly, sometimes the banks will only communicate with the designated signer, which is a pain as well. All right. This is my cat, Louie. So fluffy. He's really hot right now. All right, Jen, I think that's it.
Hi, Lindy. Thanks so much. A lot of I just wanted to say there's a lot of great conversation going on in the Q&A actually. So if you're on the webinar and haven't checked it out, check it out. There's a lot of good story sharing and advice just going on between the attendees. So, and then there are a lot of very specific situations that I don't think we want to get into right now, but some of the more general questions. What do you do if you believe that you are in someone's estate, but you haven't been contacted and it's been several months since the person passed away?
Yeah, great question. So I would start with the state statute. So go look up the probate rules for that particular state and see when probate has to be filed. Because like I said, I was looking up a case the other day. It might have been Colorado. They don't have to file a probate for 2 years and after the person died. So they have a significant amount of kind of wait time, 2 or 3 years, I think, to file probate. So keep that in mind that they may not be breaking any rules. They may just be taking their sweet time. But also along the same lines, try to look and see if there's an online docket. A lot of courts are now turning online, which is great. You can go online, you can search for the donor's name and see if probate has even been opened. And if a docket is available, you can see what's going on. And you can even sometimes pull the will and look at the will and see if you're in there. So that would be my first recommendation, is to try to go online and see if you can get a copy of the will. If you can't see it online, again, call the clerk's office. Usually they're nice. And if you are super sweet and lean on your nonprofit background, they may help you out.
So that kind of leads into two of the other questions is, how long would you consider a long time to wait for a gift?
So like typical attorney answer, it depends. But I would say if you got that notification, you got a notification today saying you've been remembered in the estate or trust, and then it's been, I'd like to say I think 3 months is kind of the max that I would want to wait. I'd give it, 3 months for them to get their things in order, for them to start marshaling assets, and then I would check in. I would do a check-in and just say, hey, it's Lindy from Charity ABC. I just wanted to say hi and see how things are going. Could you provide an update on the estate administration? And then kind of go from there. If it's been a year, that I think the year is like kind of that real serious mark of what's happening here. You're not responsive. You're not giving me what I'm looking for. No distribution has been made. That kind of year point is really extreme, in my opinion, without any further, excuse.
So we have someone asking, you've talked a lot about checking statutes and rules about things, and they're wondering, where do they go to find those things?
Yeah, great question. So if you're an attorney, you can use Westlaw, which is what I use, but you don't need Westlaw. You can usually just do a quick Google search. There are different websites that have state statutes at your disposal. There's a Cornell.law or law.cornell. Usually they have all the state statutes and can help you. And now, I don't use AI, but if you wanted to put it into AI, to ChatGPT, I'm sure you could get a quick answer. Just be as specific as possible.
I'm just looking through, there's some more, well, there's some kudos to you in the Q&A as well. And Nathan, go ahead and jump in if you have something you wanted to
Yeah, no,
ask.
I was just going to mention the same thing, Jen. Again, so much good dialogue back and forth. Love to see the engagement with everybody. You definitely struck a chord with some of the practicality of what you're providing today. So
Good,
very much appreciate that.
good, good. Yeah, I had a feeling there were a lot of nodding heads in the background and moans and groans and, head in your hand. It's terrible. I mean, we're all battling the same type of issues. And feel free to email me anytime if you ever want to chat or, have a particular sticky circumstance. I'm happy to chat just as a friend and hear what's going on.
Yeah, and I appreciate you bringing up the great work that Johnny Hayes and others have
Yes.
done with the RIF project. One of our dear friends here in Central Iowa, and she's just done some amazing work nationally to help get some of those proceeds from those IRAs. Just amazing work.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. She is the best. Again, if you don't know her website on the NACGP site, email me or email Nate. We can give it to you in really quick.
it was actually shared in the
Oh,
Q&A.
good.
So Aaron shared that. So check that out. And also some of these things that have been asked for, I'll try to gather those up and put them in the email that when I send that out tomorrow. Quick question, are financial institutions required to provide the value of the gift?
Yeah, no. Sometimes they will though. Again, this is crazy, but truly, if you get the right person on the phone, they will tell you. Some of the banks have just kind of hard and fast rules where they don't share value information. I'm thinking of the Fidelities of the world. But some of the other banks have no problem sharing. Like again, I talked to Edward Jones the other day and he gave me the value, no problem. So it really just kind of depends on the bank and who you're talking to. But there's no kind of hard and fast rule.
So that goes to the next part of her question was, how do you talk to your favorites at these places? You said that you have your favorites and you talk to them, and she's wondering, how do I reconnect with that same person? She hasn't been able to do that.
Totally. So some of them are tricky, like Fidelity will email you from a general kind of like re-reg Fidelity email account, and it's hard to get back to that exact person. But when I find somebody that I like or that's been helpful, even if they're just the tiniest bit helpful, I ask them for their direct dial. I ask them for their email address. Is there a way that I can reach you, next time, or can ask you questions? And sometimes they will give me their direct dial or a way that I can send an email and it goes directly to them.
Great, wonderful. Okay, we are out of time. I want to respect everyone's time. Lindy has offered her email address and her phone number on the screen right now, lnash@cck-law.com. So if you'd like to get a hold of her, and I'll put that information in the email I send out as well. If you'd like to get to know more about Stelter and what we do here, you can email Nathan or myself, or you can visit us at stelter.com. Again, you are going to get an email tomorrow with the link to the recording and to a PDF of the presentation slides. And thank you so much, everyone, for being here with us. It was a great conversation that was happening in the Q&A and such good practical advice from you, Lindy. This is the perfect kind of webinar that people are so hungry for to get practical information. So we really appreciate you being here with us.
My pleasure. Thank you guys so much for having me and thanks for being here, everybody. Great to see you.
Thanks, Lindy.
Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you next month. Have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.